The morning of hard choices. The sun rose slowly over the village of Chikowa. Its light spilled over the clay rooftops and the red earth paths that wound between the small huts. Smoke drifted from cooking fires, and the faint sound of roosters called to the day. Women moved in quiet rhythm, carrying water from the nearby river. Children ran barefoot in the open spaces, their laughter soft and unhurried. The market was still empty, the dust settling on wooden stalls as the day began. In one small compound at the edge of the village, Thandiwe moved with careful steps. She was tall for a woman her age and strong in a way that spoke of years spent carrying water, tending goats, and planting maize. Her mother had died many seasons ago, leaving Thandiwe and her younger siblings to navigate the small struggles of life. Her hands bore the marks of endless work, yet her eyes carried the weight of responsibility that never left her. She prepared millet porridge over the fire, stirring slowly, listening to the wind as it moved through the tall grasses. Let us move forward in the day. The village elders began gathering under the shade of the baobab tree. They spoke softly, their voices carrying the rhythms of Chikowa, discussing crops, rainfall, and the small disputes that arose between families. Thandiwe passed by without greeting them, carrying a bundle of firewood. Her mind was elsewhere, troubled by debts that pressed upon her small household. She had tried everything she knew. She had sold small baskets, gathered wild fruits, and done labor for neighbors. Yet the debts grew like a shadow that stretched longer with each passing month. Her younger brother, Chikowa, ran up from the river, water dripping from his thin arms. He held a small fish he had caught, and his smile was bright. Thandiwe could not let herself smile back. She thought of the rice they would not have for supper and the maize that might not last until the next harvest. Her heart tightened in her chest. She had heard of land buyers coming to neighboring villages. They offered money up front that could feed a family for seasons. But selling ancestral land was forbidden. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, cautioning against letting outsiders take what had been theirs for generations. Now we step into the next moment. Thandiwe made a decision that morning that no one else knew. She walked to the village outskirts where the land stretched flat and red beneath the early sun. The soil smelled rich and heavy with rain from the past season. She could see the paths the ancestors had walked, the small stone markers her grandfather had placed. The thought of selling it tore at her, yet the faces of her siblings, hungry and worn, pressed her toward action. A man from the nearby town, known for purchasing land quietly, had promised a sum that could cover all debts and leave the children with some savings. She met him at the edge of the maize fields, shaking hands silently, the papers signed under the shade of a tamarind tree. Returning home, she felt a strange emptiness. The children ran to her side, oblivious to the storm that had passed between her and the strangers who now owned what had belonged to her family for decades. She smiled, her lips forced and gentle, and carried firewood to the hut. The evening air was warm, and the smoke from neighboring fires drifted lazily across the fields. She tried to sleep that night, but found rest difficult. Her mind was full of names, debts, and the echo of a father's warning that had seemed distant but now weighed on her. As the evening settled, the village carried on unaware. Neighbors called greetings across fences. Chickens rustled through the yard. The moon rose, pale and steady, over the red earth. In the quiet, Thandiwe's hands trembled just slightly. She had done what she thought necessary. Yet deep inside, a worry stirred that the choice she made in secrecy might not remain hidden for long. The next morning brought rumors. Voices spoke in hushed tones about a family's land sold without consultation. Elders whispered to one another under the shade of mango trees. The new owners were coming, and their arrival promised change. Thandiwe watched from the window of her hut, seeing the first riders in the distance. The horse hooves struck the soil with a sound that seemed heavy with meaning. She did not move, keeping her presence small and silent. Her siblings played outside, their innocence untouched by the weight of the secret she carried. Let us move forward in the day. The strangers arrived at the village mid-morning. Their clothes were clean and stiff, unlike the worn fabrics of the villagers. They asked for the land, papers in hand, their voices polite yet firm. Villagers gathered around, curious and unsettled. Thandiwe stood at the edge, silent, observing. She felt the sharp pull of fear and guilt. Voices rose, questions asked, and answers given. She realized in that moment that what she had done was no longer her secret alone. The air shifted, carrying tension like the scent of rain before a storm. She thought of her father's grave, a small mound beneath the guava tree behind the hut. She wished she could speak to him, to ask if the weight of survival could justify her choice. The strangers moved across the fields, measuring, nodding, and speaking with her neighbors. The children continued to play, unaware of the gathering shadows. Thandiwe watched, silent and small, as the land that had fed generations was no longer hers to protect. Now the sun dipped low, painting the sky in orange and red streaks. The village quieted. Fires burned softly, and children returned to the huts. Thandiwe sat outside her home, her gaze distant. She knew the consequences were only beginning. Whispers of discontent had already begun to spread. What the villagers did not yet know was the depth of her choice and the legacy of conflicts that had slept beneath the red soil for decades. The morning arrived quietly. The sun stretched over Chikowa, brushing the clay rooftops with light. Smoke curled from cooking fires, and the soft cries of goats echoed from distant pens. Villagers began their work slowly. Women carried water, children chased one another along the dirt paths, and men walked to the fields to tend the maize and groundnuts. The arrival of the strangers had unsettled some, yet daily life moved as it always had, in steady rhythms that were hard to break. Thandiwe remained on the edge of the compound. She watched the new owners from a distance as they walked across the fields, their polished shoes leaving no trace on the red earth. She could hear their measured voices speaking in Chikowa with a hint of the city, a tone that made the villagers shift uneasily. Thandiwe's brother, Chikowa, tugged at her skirt asking when they would eat. She smiled softly, brushing his hair from his forehead, and told him to fetch water while she prepared porridge. Her heart weighed heavily. The land was sold, and yet something deeper stirred within her. A feeling she could not name pressed against her chest, a warning whispered through the wind that rustled the tall grasses. The elders gathered under the baobab tree once again. They spoke quietly among themselves, glancing toward the new owners as they walked past. Thandiwe noticed some of their eyes linger on her, suspicion hidden beneath polite nods. News traveled slowly in Chikowa, but once it arrived, it carried sharp edges. Soon, whispers reached her ears, questions about why she alone had sold the land, hints of betrayal. She kept her head low, offering small smiles and polite responses, yet inside she felt the pulse of fear growing. The land was more than soil and crops. It was family history, memory, and pride. She had taken it from herself and from the village, and now the consequences were beginning to take shape. Let us move forward in the day. The strangers moved from hut to hut, speaking with neighbors, assessing what the land could yield. They asked questions about water sources, the fertility of the soil, and the village customs. Some villagers spoke freely, unaware of the secrets Thandiwe carried. Others remained silent, wary of change. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. Birds called from the trees, their voices high and insistent. Thandiwe's mother-in-law, older and wise in the ways of the village, approached her quietly that afternoon. She lowered her voice and asked questions that made Thandiwe flinch inside. How had she dared sell the land? Who had given her permission? The woman's eyes were steady, seeing more than Thandiwe wanted them to see. Thandiwe offered small explanations and excuses, but she knew they were fragile shields against the gathering storm. Now we step into the next moment. Evening came, and the village seemed to hold its breath. The children were called home, their laughter fading into the distance. Fires burned in front of huts, and the smoke mingled with the scent of dry earth. Thandiwe walked to the small well at the center of the compound to draw water. As she bent to lift the bucket, she noticed a figure standing at the edge of the field, a man from the city. His gaze was fixed on the plot she had sold. Something in his posture spoke of patience and observation rather than anger. Thandiwe's heart skipped. She carried water back to the hut slowly, her mind heavy with thought. That night she could not sleep. She lay on the mat and listened to the wind moving through the tall grasses outside. The distant calls of goats, the soft chirping of crickets, and the occasional bark of a dog filled the quiet. Shadows shifted across the walls of the hut, stretching long and thin. She thought of her father and the stories he had told her about the old rivalries between families. There were names, alliances, and promises long buried beneath the soil. Some of these memories had seemed irrelevant as a child. Now they pressed close, as if the land she sold had awakened them. The following morning, the village awoke to murmurs. Word had spread that the land carried old debts. Previous conflicts between Thandiwe's family and neighboring clans had left scars that had never healed. The strangers were unaware. but the villagers remembered. Whispers of curses and claims from distant relatives began to surface. Thandiwe walked carefully through the village, her presence quiet. Some neighbors avoided her eyes while others spoke softly behind cupped hands. The weight of secrets she had not known threatened to pull her down. She had acted for survival, yet survival alone could not erase history. Let us move forward in the day. The new owners called a meeting beneath the baobab tree. Villagers gathered, sitting in small clusters on the dry ground. Thandiwe took a place at the edge, her hands folded, her eyes following every movement. The strangers spoke politely but firmly. They outlined their plans, asking for cooperation. Some villagers nodded, others whispered among themselves. A man named Chikowa, distant cousin of Thandiwe's late father, stood suddenly. His voice carried across the dry air. He questioned the sale, the legitimacy of the papers, and hinted at family opposition. Thandiwe's stomach sank. The hidden history she had never fully understood was now speaking through someone else. The land was more than her responsibility. It belonged to a web of old alliances and grudges, and her secret action had awakened them. Evening fell again, soft and slow. The air cooled and the children returned to their homes. Fires burned in small circles outside the huts. Thandiwe sat quietly, watching the smoke rise. Her younger sister, Nyasa, brought her a small bowl of millet. She smiled gently, accepting it without words. The weight of what was coming pressed on her, a steady, unrelenting rhythm. She knew there was no turning back. The village would see, the families would speak, and the new owners would remain. The story had grown beyond her alone. As the moon rose over Chikowa, the shadows lengthened. Thandiwe remained awake, listening. Voices from distant huts whispered, neighbors murmured, and the wind carried secrets from the past to the present. She understood in that moment that survival had a cost. She had acted for love and necessity, yet the unseen consequences were beginning to move. Ancient rivalries were stirring, old debts whispered from the soil, and the life she knew in the village was about to change forever. The morning arrived soft and slow over Chikowa. Sunlight spilled across the red soil, warming the huts and the fields. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires, and the faint clatter of wooden tools echoed as villagers prepared for the day. Children ran along the paths chasing small birds. Women carried water in clay pots balanced on their heads, walking with steady rhythm. Men moved toward the maize fields and cassava plots, their hands calloused and strong. Life continued with its usual rhythm, yet beneath it lay a tension that no one could ignore. Thandiwe stayed within the boundaries of her compound. She watched the new landowners moving through the fields, accompanied by a small group of villagers who spoke cautiously. Their questions were polite, yet firm, revealing their unfamiliarity with the traditions of Chikowa. The villagers answered carefully. Thandiwe felt a tremor in her chest. The land had been sold to help her family survive. She had thought money could smooth everything. Now she realized that survival could not erase what the land carried. Let us move forward in the day. The first confrontation came unexpectedly. Chikowa, the distant cousin, moved toward the new owners, while villagers watched from a respectful distance. His voice was steady, speaking of past claims, of promises made by ancestors, of disputes never settled. Thandiwe felt her throat tighten. The words reminded her of stories told by her father about old rivalries, about villages divided by disputes over soil and water. Some villagers murmured agreement, others shifted uneasily. The new owners nodded politely, but their silence spoke more than words. Thandiwe's hands clenched at her sides. She realized that selling the land had stirred not just anger, but questions about her family, as honor and decisions from generations past. The morning slowly bled into afternoon. Thandiwe moved between chores, carrying water, stirring porridge, and keeping her siblings close. Her younger brother, Kasia, asked small questions about the visitors. She smiled gently, keeping the truth hidden. She knew she could not explain everything. Not yet. The village held stories older than her memory, and they would not yield easily to simple answers. Her mind wandered to the papers she had signed under the tamarind tree. They had been official, clean, and legal, yet legality had little power against the weight of memory and community judgment. Now we step into the next moment. By late afternoon, the tension thickened. Villagers gathered quietly near the fields. Some whispered behind cupped hands. Others lingered at the edge of the huts. Chikowa spoke again, this time demanding meetings with elders, questioning the authority under which the land had been sold. Thandiwe watched from the shade of her hut, her stomach twisted. The past, long silent, now moved through her village like wind through dry grass. Secrets that had slept for decades rose to the surface. Family rivalries, old debts, promises never fulfilled. The land had carried them all quietly. Now they were awake. The new owners tried to keep the discussions calm. Their words were measured, attempting to show respect while insisting on their rights. Yet the villagers responded with careful resistance. Thandiwe realized then that her decision had created ripples far larger than she had imagined. Survival, necessity, and love had driven her, but they had also brought conflict. The elders listened, weighing words, nodding silently, their eyes reflecting the long memory of the village. Thandiwe wished she could disappear beneath the soil, yet she could not. She had made the choice. She would witness its consequences. Let us move forward in the day. Evening arrived slowly. Fires burned in the small courtyards of huts, sending smoke twisting into the sky. Children returned, tired from play. Women prepared supper over gentle flames, stirring pots of porridge and roasting small fish. Thandiwe sat at the edge of the compound, her hands folded. Nyasa, her younger sister, came quietly, bringing a small cup of water. Thandiwe smiled softly and drank. The village was quiet, yet the whispers had not ended. Old rivalries and memories had awoken. They moved like shadows across the red soil, touching every home and every heart. That night Thandiwe could not sleep. She listened to the wind moving through the tall grasses and the distant call of goats and dogs. She remembered her father's words, warnings about pride and choices, about the weight of the land. He had never spoken of selling, never imagined the need that drove a childless woman to desperation. Yet she had done it. She had acted for her family's survival. Now the consequences circled around her, invisible but heavy. The following morning, the new owners returned to the compound with a small entourage. Chikowa and a few elders accompanied them. Their questions became sharper, probing the family history, uncovering forgotten disputes. Villagers leaned closer, listening. The tension was quiet but constant. Thandiwe's heart pounded. The land had been her secret. Now it was the concern of the entire village. Decisions from decades past and grievances long buried had found their voice. She realized that her act of survival had become a catalyst, and she had no power to stop what was coming. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Thandiwe walked slowly along the edge of the field. The air smelled of smoke, earth, and dry grass. Fires burned in the huts. The villagers moved quietly, their conversations low and careful. She thought of her siblings and their laughter earlier in the day. She thought of the promises she had made to herself and the sacrifices she had endured. Survival had been her guide. Yet she now understood that survival could not shield her from history, from the weight of memory, from the slow movement of human hearts shaped by generations. Evening deepened and the moon rose over Chikowa. Shadows stretched across the huts and fields. Thandiwe remained awake, listening to the soft noises of the village. Whispers, movements, and silent gazes carried messages she could not yet read. The land had been sold, survival had been secured, yet something far older had been awakened. And in that awakening, she understood that nothing in her village would remain as it had been. The morning arrived in Chikowa with a soft light that seemed to hold its breath. The red soil glowed warm and still. Smoke rose slowly from cooking fires. Children ran along the paths, their bare feet kicking dust into the air. Women carried water, balancing clay pots on their heads, moving in steady rhythm. Men made their way to the fields carrying hoes and baskets, their movements deliberate and unhurried. The village moved quietly, yet the tension of the past days lingered like a shadow over every hut and pathway. Thandiwe remained close to her compound. She watched the new landowners and the distant cousin, Chikowa, as they spoke with elders and neighbors. Their words were calm but firm. Questions about the legitimacy of the sale, promises made long ago, and hidden debts rose to the surface. Villagers listened quietly. Some nodded. Others shifted their weight uneasily. Thandiwe's stomach tightened. The land had been sold to ensure survival. Yet survival had stirred more than money. It had stirred pride, memory, and long-forgotten grievances that now walked openly through the village. Let us move forward in the day. By mid-morning, the conversations had become heated, though voices remained measured. Chikowa reminded everyone of the promises made by Thandiwe's father. He spoke of boundaries, alliances, and responsibilities that stretched across generations. The villagers listened with careful attention. Thandiwe kept her distance, her hands clasped. She felt the weight of the village on her shoulders. Every eye that turned toward her carried expectation, judgment, and quiet anger. She had acted for love and necessity, yet she had become a center of tension and scrutiny. The new owners maintained a polite exterior, yet she could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They had not expected the land to carry stories older than any signature or contract. As the day moved forward, Thandiwe tried to attend to her chores. She fetched water, swept the courtyard, and prepared food for her siblings. Kasia and Nyasa followed her closely, their laughter soft and persistent. She smiled faintly at them. She could not allow her fear to reach their eyes. The children were innocent of the complexities of land, legacy, and secrets. Yet even their small voices seemed to echo the growing unrest. She felt the past, present, and future pressing on her. Every footstep across the red soil reminded her that choices were rarely simple. Now we step into the next moment. In the afternoon, an elder approached Thandiwe. He spoke gently but clearly. He reminded her that every choice carried consequences beyond the immediate. He spoke of family honor, the quiet respect owed to ancestors, and the delicate balance of life in Chikowa. Thandiwe listened, her head low, her heart heavy. She understood the truth of his words. Her actions had been guided by survival. Yet survival alone could not protect a family from the consequences of broken trust. The land she had sold was more than soil. It was memory, connection, and the pulse of generations. Let us move forward in the day. The new owners walked the fields again. Their questions were fewer now, more cautious. They measured distances and examined the soil. Chikondi and a few elders followed, quietly reminding them of the village's customs and history. Thandiwe remained on the periphery, silent and observing. She felt the shifting balance of power. Survival had been achieved, yet peace remained fragile. The village had memories, rivalries, and long-held promises. Her secret sale had awakened them. She realized fully that her act, though intended to protect, had also disturbed a long-settled harmony. As the evening settled, fires burned gently in front of the huts. Children returned from playing in the fields. Women brought food to the central courtyard. Men moved slowly from their work. Thandiwe sat quietly, listening to the soft noises of the village. The wind carried whispers from one hut to another. Conversations were measured, polite, and careful. Every shadow seemed to hold meaning. She thought of her siblings, her neighbors, and the strangers who now owned her family's land. Her heart was heavy yet steady. She knew that life in the village would continue, yet it would never be the same. Night fell, the moon rising over Chikowa. Shadows stretched long across the fields. Thandiwe remained awake, feeling the pulse of the village, listening to the quiet voices of memory and history. The consequences of her choices had unfolded slowly but surely. Ancient rivalries were present. Old promises had been challenged. And through it all, she understood that life would continue, shaped now by both survival and the ripples of her decisions. The following days moved with a gentle rhythm. Work in the fields, cooking fires, and the laughter of children continued. Villagers adapted, neighbors reconciled, and the new owners learned the patterns of the land. Thandiwe moved carefully through her days, tending her family, keeping the memory of her father alive. In quiet moments, the land remained under new stewardship. The village held its stories, and she carried hers quietly, knowing that survival had come at a cost that was real, human, and inescapable. In time, the village adjusted. Families spoke quietly of the past and slowly found ways to coexist with the change. Thandiwe's siblings grew with her guidance. The new owners respected the rhythms of Chikowa, learning the ways of its people. Thandiwe herself found a measure of peace. Not the easy peace of ignorance, but the calm, hard-won understanding that life continued, shaped by choices, love, and the weight of memory. She walked the land each day, knowing its soil and history, aware of what had been lost, and what had been preserved through care and endurance. And so the story of Chikowa's land moved quietly forward. Life in the village remained simple yet layered, full of small joys, responsibilities, and the gentle persistence of memory. Thandiwe's choice had set events in motion, yet the village endured. She learned that survival required courage, understanding, and the patience to witness consequences unfold. She had acted from necessity, and through her actions, the village, her family, and herself were forever changed. The land remained, both in memory and in presence, a testament to the quiet resilience of human life and the enduring heartbeat of Chikowa. In the quiet Malawian village of Chikowa, Thandiwe carried the weight of her family on her shoulders. Struggling to survive, she secretly sold her family's ancestral land, believing the money would secure her siblings' future. But when the new owners arrived, long-buried rivalries, forgotten debts, and family secrets resurfaced, threatening everything she had worked to protect. As whispers and tension spread through the village, Thandiwe learned that survival comes at a cost and that choices made out of love can awaken consequences beyond imagination. This is a deeply human tale of desperation, courage, and the fragile balance between survival and legacy.